Chris Gazdick, your host of Through a Therapist's Eyes on, you mentioned Juneteenth, John. When is that? Is that today, tomorrow, or whatever? Today is
June 19th.
June 19th, 2025.
And it was celebrated first time in Texas on June 19th in 1865.
In 1865?
65, and it's an African-American holiday predominantly. Now it's become a national holiday, which is a good thing because it was freedom of those who had been enslaved.
Okay.
And so, but the people in Texas weren't told, even though the Civil War had been over like 3 months, there were people that were still in bondage. And it was when the general went to Galveston of the Union Army, and he went and he proclaimed the proclamation of emancipation. And so that's...
Neil, did you know like any of that? He's shaking his head. Oh, he has a mic.
Yeah, I knew part of that.
Did you?
Not as well as him, but
yeah,
it's
a lot there.
June 19th, 2021.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know what? Maybe unrelated or very related. Our topic today is what is love, feeling or commitment, right?
Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me.
I knew we were going to have the resident
What
singer.
is love?
Guys, for YouTube Live, there's going to be multiple songs sung.
Hadaway.
You are hearing John Pope, by the way. He's back with us
Back
today.
From the dead.
You feeling better?
Yeah. It was a bad case of COVID.
Yeah, that's right. You were knocked out for... It was a good solid week, wasn't it?
A good solid week.
Yeah.
And I still get tired.
Yeah.
But I'm not like I was.
COVID is not fun.
Oh, no.
And Victoria is not with us. She has got childcare stuff. And our stand-in, I did actually reach out. I'm going to hopefully say that she is our stand-in. Carrie was unable to attend as well. So you got John and I for this episode of Through a Therapist's Eyes. As you're finding us on this platform for the first time, we use where we turn the mics on before the live show here on Apple Podcast, iTunes, all that kind of stuff. And we'll be firing the mics up here momentarily whenever, I guess, Neil, you're ready.
Ready whenever you are.
All right, let's do it. Hello, this is Chris Gazdick, and you are found Through a Therapist's Eyes, where we're going to be talking here on June the 19th. John tells me this is Juneteenth Day, by the way. Happy Juneteenth. What are we supposed to say on this day? Happy June.
Yeah, it's a time of great celebration. So it's sort of like it's in the family of 4th of July.
I'm still trying to get my bearings on what we're supposed to do with this new holiday.
Well, I think everything's open except for federal.
We cook out? I mean, I want to know what the activities. We
need
some cool
in
thing,
some
like
African American culture,
Southern grits, or I mean, what do we need? Some food staples.
Soul food.
Soul food.
Yeah.
Okay, soul food.
Soul food, right?
So we need the Creole and
the Creole
and soul food. Okay, well, happy Juneteenth, everybody.
Yeah,
we're going to be talking about what is love, and the three questions we're going to be having you to think about today are: do you think that love is more about feeling or choosing to commit? How have different kinds of love shown up in your life? Romantic, passion, deep friendship, etc. And then thirdly, what type of love do you want more in your relationships, like right now? So those are provocative questions that hopefully you'll be thinking about as you get insights from a panel of therapists in your car or home, but knowing this is not the delivery of therapy services in any way. I already said I think this is June the 19th. That's the holiday. Got the book out, John, Through a Therapist's Eyes. Two books,
right.
One on marriage and one on self. Get them both.
Get them both, and you want to say you're the one that you just wrote about marriage and relationships is what's the full title?
Through a Therapist's Eyes, Re-Understanding Your Marriage and Becoming Your Best as a Spouse.
Okay, and so repeat that in your mind 7 times.
And you will remember to go buy it. Seriously, it'll be a helpful thing, I think, for you. Subscribe, click. Look, we want to give you content. We enjoy doing it. We hope we make you laugh a little bit. We hope you get some information a little bit, and we hope you get some stereotypes and myths blown up a whole lot from what we do. But your job is to subscribe, click the button, bell, notifications. We're looking for YouTube subscribers such as, hey, Kelly Ann Zukowski is a new YouTube subscriber. You got to give her a clap,
welcome, Kelly Ann.
All right, welcome, Ann, aboard. And how many stars can they
I
John,
think
do you-
give
3,
5.
2, maybe.
No,
Two?
no, give 5
It
stars.
has to be 5.
Yes, has to be 5 stars, even if it's aspirational. We
Even
wanna,
if it's aspirational.
yeah, give us the benefit of the doubt. Yeah.
Contact at throughatherapisteyes.com is a great way to interact with us as well. We love the feedback. And then the YouTube lives. Check them out on Thursdays at about 6:30. We do YouTube lives, and it's a great way to interact with us as well. We get comments through the show. We love to embed them and incorporate them in a little bit as we go along. So what else do we need to say, John? This is the human emotional experience, which
I can't.
you can't do it.
I can't do it. You do it.
Which we endeavor to figure out together. I don't have to own that. We can all
Yeah,
say
that's
that.
wonderful. That's wonderful. It's like, I mean, I'm a minister and I have trouble remembering how to do the Apostles' Creed sometimes. So
The Apostles' Creed's a long one, man.
it is.
That's the long one.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into our topic because we have a lot to talk about with this thing, I think, today, right? This is sort of, okay, in a professional circle, John, I love to pontificate, discuss, debate, relate to the question, isn't it awesome when we get professionals in a room, we simply ask the question, what is addiction? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the dialogue that comes is always amazing to me.
Right.
I feel like in a bar or in a setting in personal life, when you ask this question, what is love? Don't you think there's a similarity between what we get with these dynamic but simple questions sometimes?
Yeah, definitely.
Like people have way wildly varied descriptions or statements, I feel like, when you ask this question.
Okay, and it depends also, maybe if you even have a personality disorder, and you would have a very different definition of love, I
you
suspect.
probably would.
Yeah.
But what does a listening public know about personality disorders? You got to give us a little more about that, I think.
Well, let's say, for example, a person that is antisocial, personality disorder is a sort of a core or bedrock belief, a sense of self, and that person does not have an ability, and through experience or through nurture or nature or both, that they may not have a good working understanding of empathy. And I think when we talk about love, there's in all the types of love that you discussed in our notes that we're going to be talking about, there is empathy that is very much a center part of it. And if somebody
Doesn't have that ability.
and let's say somebody also has one of the dark personality issues, like narcissism, for example, they have a trouble with understanding and what love
Putting
is,
themselves
and
in somebody else's
or a
shoes.
person that is borderline. There's a profound sense of emptiness, because if one is loved and one is able to love, that one is able to not have a sense of self that is rooted. It's fundamental.
Here's a bombastic statement on the front end of our show.
we're okay.
Bombastic statement I'm going to say is, I feel like love is like pornography. Isn't that crazy of a statement?
Well, when I saw the notes, I was going, okay.
What does this mean, right? Let me tell you what I mean by that. Because obviously love is very different than pornography, but it's understanding what it is that we're talking about here. And pornography has a lot of variables in trying to discern, is this pornography or is this not? If you try to write a paragraph about this, you will struggle. But I love the phrase, and we were talking about this on the show a year or two ago when we discussed pornography a little bit. You have a hard time describing what it is, but when you see it, you know it.
That's like one of the Supreme Court judges from the 60s.
Right. That's where we landed.
Yeah.
When Hustler or Hustle or whatever porn magazines, anyway, it doesn't matter.
But
they were in Supreme Court to gain rights for publications and stuff, and that was a little bit of a landing spot. Was that all the way in the 60s, though?
It was the 60s and going into the 70s.
And what was the name of that hustling?
Larry Hustler. It was Larry Flint. And no, I don't.
I couldn't remember the right name.
Yeah. No, I'm a child of the 70s and the 60s, and so that was a big
That was a
topic.
big deal.
Big talking
Flynn
point.
was his name, right? Flynn
Yeah,
goes
Larry
into
Flynn,
Supreme Court. And
he was
Yeah.
a good old boy from Kentucky that just
hustling.
head hustler.
So love is like that. I feel like you might have a harder time describing pornography in a paragraph. You can write a paragraph about love probably a lot easier, but you know when you're loved. You know because you experience it. You can feel it. You know it. You feel it. You experience it. And therefore, it's maybe hard for you to say what it is, but it's not hard for you to discern that was a loving person in my life and that was not a loving person in my life. Does that sound fair?
It does sound fair. It's like Fiddler on the Roof, and Tevyev asked his wife, "Do you love me?" He says that, and she says, "Do I what?" And she doesn't want to say it.
Yep.
But she says this is what she does, and so she knew what love was. She just didn't want to. She didn't know how to express it.
That's somewhere in here. Did you know that? Did you look?
No.
You're totally going to it. You didn't know that.
Yeah, I just jump all over the place.
Yeah,
So.
there's it's somewhere in here where I had to talk about. I don't know where it is, but I have. We'll get to it because that Fiddler on the Roof. Yeah, she talks about. I've cleaned your clothes and done your dishes and set up your food and cooked your meals for 25 years. Yeah. That's love, basically. Yeah. You know, like, yes, I love you. If that isn't love, then I don't know what is or something like that. So that's awesome that you quoted that kind of as well, right off the get-go. Is this a feeling or is this a commitment? There's a little bit of a debate, I think, that would be fun to have. Like, you know, or should we just say, John, you know, oh, God, you could go off on this for a while with the what is love question, right?
Yeah.
You could just...
Baby, don't hurt me.
Should I? Told you he's going to be singing, guys.
Sometimes you drive the pain into the heart of me. Tainted love.
Tainted love. Keep going, John. Let's just get it all out of your system.
I get it out. Yeah.
I love these song references that you do.
Well,
but no, like, is it a feeling or is it a commitment? What say you?
Me?
Yeah.
Or your listening audience, too.
You.
Well, I think it's both. I think it's both and. I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you don't have that feeling, you're not connecting. And so emotionally. And so you've got to have that emotional connection or even an intellectual connection.
Interesting. Let's take
a
tangent here.
But it is what you're doing too.
I hadn't
it's
thought,
active,
right? Yeah, and that's probably the landing spot. It is both, but it's interesting because I hadn't even thought about this as I was prepping. But we definitely need to cover this. Mm-hmm. This phrase that I cannot stand, Mr. Pope. Have you ever heard of the phrase "I am in love"? Oh, you see the YouTube facial expression.
Oh,
everyone.
God, yeah. That's what the people used to.
We just fell out of love, John.
Oh, we're doing premarital counseling, and we're so in love, and
right.
So, and then of course they have that great folk rock anthem, "Amy, I'm falling in and out of love with you."
Now that's a good theme, though.
Right.
That's actually not bad.
Amy, what you gonna do? I'm so in love with you for a while, maybe longer. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So you fall in and out of love, and there's a consistency there. The consistency is that there is inconsistency, but there is a sense that you're in that wavelength.
Okay, let's go with this for a little bit. This is a whole different section.
Okay.
Whole different segment. What do people mean when they say I'm in love? Or I've fallen out of love. And can you fall in and out of love many times over the course of a month, year, or decade of marriage?
English is not a very good language to be able to define love. And I think if you could...
That's a bold statement.
Okay, it is a bold. There's only one word for love. And in English, there's in Greek, Koine Greek, there's like 4 different types of love.
Oh, they actually use those words. Yeah, okay.
Use them to describe them. And so we don't have a word for that. And so when somebody says, I'm in love, a lot of times when somebody says, I'm in love, or I've fallen out of love, that's infatuation.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I see that on your.
And what does infatuation mean?
It's more about you than it is about the person that is to be the object of your subject of your desire. Okay. In other words, the person, it's you're treating another person as an I it, not as an I thou.
I remember a very long time ago, John, I was in therapy with a particular guy, and he was separated and divorcing. He was really rocked by it. Pretty funny fella. A reformed gang member, actually.
Oh,
I
my
think
goodness.
That's true.
Yeah.
You'd never know it because he was so fun-loving and carefree, and really enjoyed him. Very warm fella. And anyway, in this process that he was in and kind of refiguring himself out and all, we kind of deduced that this feeling, this sense, this infatuation, this I'm in love feeling is just God's little gift, right?
Yeah.
And God's little gift for a period of 6 whole months. Because as you know, John, I'm sure you do, listener listening, when you meet somebody new, the oxytocin is flowing, man. The chemicals are banging. It is so
love
exciting.
Hormone.
Oh, baby.
Yeah.
Everything's fired up and kicking, and it's just so wonderful because it's so new. And literally, you'll have that for 6 months. Between 6 months and 2 years, it dissipates, and at 2 years, at least by 2 years, it's gone, if not earlier. So that's God's little gift. That's what we figured out in therapy together.
Well,
and
it sounds like he's a very wise man.
That's what I've called it ever since.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. He was
Yeah.
very, very, very astute, and we did a lot of good work together.
But I would hazard to and venture to say that I think that it really becomes love when you make it past that 6 months, and then it becomes more about the other person than it does about how you feel.
Yeah.
And
And
maybe that's nature's way of, and God's little gift is to keep people to stay with one person, and as long as possible, and then.
what do you mean by that? Yeah.
Well, I think I know people like to talk about having multiple partners, and that's normalizing it and that sort of thing.
There's a lot of normalization.
Right. But I think
things going on now, yeah.
But actually, the best way that one can develop a relationship is to have a significant other than just one person. I mean, it's between two people. That's my sense of it. Is I think that's the building block of families, and that seems to be in every culture. Even if they're polyamorous in some ways, there's always a dominant relationship. So
Dominant relationship, meaning
male female between, and so there'd be a primary. Even in traditional cultures, there's the first wife as opposed.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They have that title in polygamy and all?
Or polygamy, right.
Okay.
Even a polyamorous.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Polyamorous and polygamous.
So
there's a lot of different forms. I thought this was cool the way this
read your
article,
Margaret Mead.
Which by the way, I have a lot of references with this particular episode, so you'll love the show notes if you want to dig in. There's different places to dig in articles and such. Not so much researchy though, but just a well varied piece of things. Even have a little Wikipedia going. But from this article, it was a nice reframe. Love, an intense feeling of deep affection. Okay, that's cool. I don't have a major problem with that, but I love the way it was reframed to love is to feel and act lovingly, right? And that's what we talked about. It's an and for sure. It's both. But there's an interesting comparison they put on with domestic violence situations where the person says they're in love. They have this intense infatuation, John. And you know this with people that actually are narcissistic or abusive to their partners. They're madly in love, bombing. 3 dozen roses were brought to my client. True story. 3 dozen roses were brought to my client's place of work or at least a year after they had been broken up.
Oh, my gosh.
Right. It's like, bro, like that person's in love, but it's not love. Right? So in domestic violence, we can see even I can't live without you, but then it's violent. So we can see clearly that this isn't love, that loving someone extreme, but lesser situations are, in the same vein. So basically, like, to me, there's so much that goes in. Like, yeah, I agree. Like, in marriage, one of the things I think about marriage is really just about serving the other person. It's not about your feeling and what you've got going on. It's more, what you're doing to love this person.
Right.
To be with, to engage, to support, to encourage. What's the Bible thing that everyone says at the weddings? Love is kind. Love is,
it's from 1 Corinthians 13.
There you go. Everyone quotes it.
From Paul, right. In talking about it, it's patient, kind. It's
all these traits.
And it's not demanding. It's one. It's giving. It's open.
So, is it fundamentally a choice? So, if it's a commitment, if it's a feeling, and it's all these traits, do you choose it?
Yeah. Interesting.
Do you choose who you love? Is it?
I have on my ring inside here.
It's a beautiful ring.
It's my wedding band, and I've had it for 43 years.
Yeah,
and
that's
it says
awesome.
De Ligamus Amare, which is Latin. It's we choose to love.
That's what it says in there?
Yes.
Love that.
And it's also from Joshua, as for me and my house, we shall serve the Lord, which is actually following becoming a people of God. But for Joy and me, it was the idea that we choose to love, and there's that aspect. And that is a reminder that we're imperfect, but nevertheless, when we don't feel like we're much in love, we can always go back to our vows and say, we do
That's
choose.
real.
It's real for us.
Yeah. This is where I had the Fiddler on the Roof, and I put in the show notes there. Are you ready, John? Are you game here? Because I figured you would be down with the Fiddler on the Roof.
Right.
And you brought it up and went with it, even
I
the
didn't
proper
even see it.
names
Yeah.
and stuff,
Yeah.
that I didn't know. So
Tevyev.
the main character is what's her name?
His name is Tevyev.
Tevyev.
I can't recall her name.
Okay.
Do you know?
Neil's not going to pull that, I don't think. But so she's asked, the main character's asked, do you love me? And she responds, for 21 years, I have washed your clothes, cooked your meals, cleaned the house, given you children, milked your cow. She asks then, is that not love? What is?
Yeah. It's
You're
love
right.
in action. Yes.
Love is real.
Is real. Is in action. So it's tangible in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's not just some ethereal kind of Greek thought that just is out there in the ether. It's
John,
real.
I really feel like there's a lot of pain out there with this, where people get really confused and misunderstand their own feelings and misattribute, particularly with the in-love reality.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what they're feeling and how to shake it through, and creates a lot of pain. I mean, do you see that in your therapy? Because I think I do a lot.
I do. Yeah, I do. I see a lot of people who have a broken concept. I'm looking at this and I'm adding a value judgment, but then that's my perspective, I guess, and that is that they mistake love for, let's say, a kind of a relationship where there's a disproportionality of power or something. So if this person finds me attractive, then I'm going to make sure that I will love him, but he can beat the crap out of me, and I'll accept that because I'm not worthy of being loved.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. So
that's a deep level of confusion.
Yeah, it
about
is.
I mean,
Yeah.
or when we get warped life experiences that help us to interpret, what somebody does and what love does feel like, that can get warped, contrary to what I said a little while ago.
I had a girlfriend 50 years ago.
Yep.
I've always had a little rubber tire here, and she would pinch me and say, "Get rid of it. Get rid of it." She wouldn't accept me.
Oh, man.
So she didn't just accept me for who I was. Yeah.
That's brutal.
It was brutal.
That's mean.
And guess what? My
I don't
selfish
like
and-
her. If that is you, shame on you, whoever you are out there, hopefully listening.
Yeah.
That's terrible, John.
Yeah, it was. But she wasn't seeing me.
No.
Yeah. And normally, that's from a female doing that, because traditionally it's those guys that are, look at my face, not,
Yeah.
not at my assets.
Yeah. I think there's a lot there in the pain point that people have, not feeling accepted, not, I write about in the marriage book, right? The golden egg, and we've talked about it a few times recently. And that's a bit of the theme this month, rather, with relationship dynamics and connections and bonds.
June
and how
weddings.
We engage. Well, there's a lot of weddings. You're right, June and May for sure. I didn't think about that actually, but you're right. But what I'm saying is like, the pain point that people have with this, and the confusion that they have, even in way of, like you just aptly described, warping their views about this is I think more common than you would think. I mean, our divorce rate is 50% still around the world, I think, too.
Yeah.
And
I think the reason why it's so high is just that people have been married once will get married again and again. And so it's not as high in terms of couples as like 50% of couples end up in divorce, but it's the marriages they're repeat marriages.
No, I think I'm going to push back at that.
Please
but you're
do.
the researcher. I probably, the way I always thought about it is our divorce rate actually has gone down just a little bit with millennials, because they're waiting a long time to get married, and
they're
they
waiting
want
too long to have kids.
and even longer to have kids. Yeah, it scares me for them. But I thought the first marriages had
Well,
about
as a culture and
45.
society, we need more kids.
Yeah, we do. But I thought 45 to 50 was for first marriages. People that are in their second marriage, their rates are like 60, 65, and then third marriages is like 70, 80% likely to end in divorce. So
It does raise the rate overall.
does it?
Yeah.
With-
But I'm saying is that most people, I would say a plurality of people don't get divorced.
Yeah, about 50%. I thought though, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just confused.
Well, they're
John,
repeat.
with the
I have
statistics
an
of it.
uncle that got married 5 times.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, great guy. He's a
Yeah.
doctor, wonderful guy, but he just would marry
Flippantly, or
flippant. Yeah, I mean he got it wrong until he got.
and
it
I guess
right.
what I'm saying is he doesn't affect the 50% statistic, does he?
Yes, he does.
You think he does? Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
he
then that's where
adds
I'm
to that.
confused.
Yeah,
Because I thought that was first marriages.
yeah.
And you're saying across the board that
Overall,
it.
it lowers it. Yeah,
okay. Well,
but I mean, I could be wrong.
I don't think it matters for our conversation, but I'm sure I'm the wrong one, John. Let's go theories and perspectives a little bit, and get into a little bit of the types of love. Right? I've never heard this before. I almost have to read it because it was fascinating. I wanted to think about it. There's definitely check out this article where a guy named Sternberg's got a triangle theory of love that I thought was really pretty interesting, and the way that he kind of conceptualized this. So he has 3 different elements or components to the ultimate kind of love that we want to get to. One is intimacy, and that's liking somebody. Passion, which is the infatuation that we were talking about. And then commitment, which we've been talking about, which is empty love, like the fiddler.
Yeah.
So the lady in the Fiddler on the Roof was really committed, but didn't really have any infatuation, didn't have any passion. She was just doing stuff. And was she intimate? Meaning, did she like him? I don't know. It didn't come clear, but she definitely had the commitment. So this guy made combinations here to create like different understandings of the combinations you can have and what that outcome is. So if you have intimacy and commitment, you have a companion love. So you're great companions, right? Because you have the intimacy part, you like them, and then you have the commitment part, you do things for them, okay? But another form is a combination of commitment and passion, and that's a fatuous love, right?
Yes.
So you have the I do things for you. Also, I'm infatuated. I get turned on and whatnot. But you're missing the third. So consummate love is all three of them. And I guess we're looking for ultimately to consummate, this pairing that we've created, this partnering that we've done
and you
with
break down
all
that
three.
word, it means with.
Okay,
So in
does
other
it?
words, so what you've done is it's all encompassing.
Okay.
And consummate, and that is you have the intimacy, you have the commitment, and you have the passion, and all three factors are very important, even into old age. It's very important.
Well, maybe even more so in old age.
Right.
Or can we say as you get older and you really master some of the relationship dynamics, that you can learn about and that you can choose to be engaged with, that you can grow with, right? Those are important themes.
Right.
And get to a place where you have better loving relationships, also better sex than you ever had when you were younger too, I think is a true statement. When you begin getting with a partner as you really feel safe and get in that golden egg space.
You can lose yourself into that relationship, into that intimate relationship.
I think so. And don't you think when we mature and we grow into some of these things and develop stronger elements of all three of Steinberg's kind of thing, at least, you achieve that more.
Right.
And I guess I would point that out for people that are like struggling now to create hope, which is where you expect something positive is going to happen, right?
Right.
To expect that we can grow together. We can get back in love. We can realign ourselves.
And it takes commitment. I'm thinking about the incel movement now, involuntarily celibate folks that they have.
The incel? I do not know what that is.
Do you know what that is?
Nah,
Okay.
I'm not.
They're the guys that live in the basement
Okay.
at their parents' house. And
Oh,
they're
boy.
in their 30s and they're
40s.
The comic book guy
Okay.
from The Simpsons.
Video
kind of
game.
person.
Like the
Yeah,
comic
they
book
don't.
guys.
They're not wanting to be celibate, but then they're not wanting to
risk.
and reach out, because love is a risk. If you really, it's not just
So perilous, isn't it?
It is
Can
perilous.
be perilous.
Because you basically you give your most, you strip away yourself. You're naked with somebody, and there's a possibility that person is not going to reciprocate, or that person will chew you up and
Deny you. Betray you. Leave you.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. There's definitely a downside and a negative side that's of risk. So they fall into that trap where they don't really have the ability to engage or reach out.
Right.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah. No, I've never heard that term.
Yeah. So, do you know any incels, Neil?
I don't. Well, I probably did when I wanted to go play Magic a lot more, but I don't really know any personally now. But I mean, I think I've even seen women who do that now. The idea that you just don't put yourself out there, you avoid the opposite sex, and you just live the life that you want to live, and you just don't care. So it's definitely it's funny how many terms Chris doesn't know sometimes with everything. He's kind of a.
Hey, I'm 72 years old, man. I'm out of it.
Clouds.
He's more of a boomer than you, John.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch. It's okay.
Ouch,
It's true.
boomer.
Ouch.
Hey,
Well,
boomer.
Hey, I'm an Xer. I just want to point that out. But Xers can be airheady too, or not, be in the clouds. All right, let's talk about along with this Steinberger's thing. I just thought that was a new and different thing. But you said something interesting about the language, John. I thought that's kind of fascinating, because I would love to be able to know other languages, because
You Greek?
I know none. I mean, they tried to teach me Spanish in school because I had to get there. But it's interesting that they actually use these different words like filio love and
Latin
eros
has
love
different. Latin even has different words for love,
Yeah.
but not as many as Greek. There are variations on it, but the thing is that you have to have in a relationship elements of all the love, and I think Sternberg actually kind of touches onto this.
Okay, do you think? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know much about Sternberg, but what he describes it as is very analogous to what C.S. Lewis says in the Four Loves, which is storge, which is affectionate or familial love, philia, which is friendship, Philadelphia, city of freedom, brotherly love, eros, romantic love, and agape. And
What we're all after,
which is unconditional love.
which is so not human.
Right. Yeah. And
I would love to be able to say that I do that.
The question
John.
is whether we're capable of it, but
Right.
we are aspiring for it, and that we can just accept that God loves us in that sense. If assuming that you believe in God, that you would be able to receive that unconditional love. We in counseling, we call it unconditional positive regard,
Right.
and make that environment. And you were talking about the golden egg. Well, that's where you would find agape love.
Agape, right.
Okay. So I think in every relationship, you have to have those 4 types of.
So you want to combine all of that together in all relationships, though?
No, in an intimate relationship.
Okay. In ultimately
Yeah,
is part of
physically,
marriage, but-
emotionally, marriage, partnership with somebody.
Okay. But not
yeah.
like family or other close relationships and such, right?
Right.
Okay. So you're
Okay.
talking mostly about marriage love. Yeah, I was
But
confused by
I
that.
think most of us keep together because of storge love in families, which is.
I think this is kind of what I meant off the get-go, where love is like pornography, where you know pornography if you see it, but it's hard to describe it.
Yeah.
Like in relationships where we're just buddies, we're friends, but we love each other. I mean, John, I've come to love you as a companion at Metrolina. You add so much here. But I don't think people. Like, when you say intimacy, people think you're talking about sex, but
It's-
there's so much more
Right.
about loving a person than that, and I think that people get really confused about that. Again, where we drop off and fail to really offer people what it is that we'd like to be able to be unconditional accepting people, agape, and people really, 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 really struggle with all of that.
Yeah. I agree. I wish I could be more, say, okay, well, this is what you have to do to demonstrate or be in love, but it's, or to have that authentic love between a couple, for example, or it's a lot more, it's more complicated than that. I wish it, but you have friends from childhood, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of friendship would that be? Would that be philia?
To me, it's. I mean, there's a couple people that I've known for a long, long time. Probably no one from childhood, more college, but
but
those are
you-
deep, connected, loving friendships.
And
that-
when you say that you love that person, I say I have a couple of friends that I say I love you,
yeah,
and they're males,
right,
and we're not into any sexual relationship whatsoever. It is more of a
It's a respect
a
and
respect.
acceptance
It's a storge. It's an agape love. It's a philia love.
You know what's funny that just occurred to me listening to you and having us talk? How many people struggle to say that? Do you know there are people that have never heard their parent, not just dads, moms as well, literally like the Fiddler on the Roof. She didn't
Right.
want to say it. She didn't want to make the proclamation.
I had a grandmother
love
and a
you.
grandfather on my mother's side that those words never came out of their
Very
mouth.
scary to people, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine that literally, we were just talking about that just not too long ago. It just occurred to me. He's never heard his dad say that to him. It's like, wow, like, really? That sucks. That this creates terror, I guess, right? As much as
Yeah.
it can be wonderful,
Yeah.
it can bring up like loss and
It's a very
betrayal.
powerful word, isn't it?
Love is a powerful word.
Yeah. It's verbish. It's like a verb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they say adjective, noun, verb. There's a lot of elements to all of the different dynamics that go into this, but I don't know. I just got stuck on for the moment in like the panic people feel
Yeah.
about this issue, to the point where they won't even utter the word.
Yeah. To have an authentic and transparent love can also be able to work through somebody's difficult parts in their lives. And so they may make it very difficult for you to say, I like this person. But you can, in fact, love somebody and not necessarily like their personality or what's going on with them.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I have a deep love and appreciation for the people that I'm close to. I mean, if I call you friend, that is not a simple word to me, you know. And so there's risks, and I guess the challenge that I would maybe get us to think about is how do we manage those risks? How do we manage that fear-based feeling? How do we manage those insecurities? And that is a type of love,
Right.
self love. You wanna go with Whitney's voice there, John? You want to try a little Whitney?
And I will always love you.
She's got such a powerful voice, and that song actually was very influential to me as a young man. You know, in the '80s when that came out, maybe early '90s.
I was in the Navy then. When
it was
came out.
it was because it's hard to love yourself, and so if you think about
and you really go to the top of the register. So I mean, it shows a full commitment.
Yeah, she does. So, you know, we're talking about these different types: platonic, family, you know, and compassionate, you know, agape love. What about this idea of self-love? How do we engage that? How do people? Do you think people are aware of the need to love themselves?
I don't think so, but you know, there's a lot of biblical warrant for people to love themselves. It's love thy neighbor as thyself. Why does it gives the predicate is as thyself, basically.
Yeah.
You predicate it on.
You love
can't
yourself.
love others unless you love yourself.
And I think that's a true statement. I mean, I don't think that's a colloquialism or just a phrase or thing to utter or even a joke. I think there's, psychologically speaking, that's dead on. You cannot love other people if you don't love yourself.
Right.
Is that a true statement?
I think it's a true statement, and I don't think you're being self-centered or anything of that sort. It's because you're willing to look at yourself, warts and all, and say, this is who I am. I'm wanting to always be I'm aspiring to be better and to be transformed and changed, but you accept yourself on a very fundamental level, which would indicate self-love.
Yeah. Do you think it's easy or difficult
I think it's
to
difficult.
engage in self-love?
I think we get it confused. It's easy to be narcissistic in our love. I think it's more difficult to actually have authentic acceptance, radical
ourselves.
Radical acceptance of ourselves. If we are to accept ourselves, and again, I'm getting theological, and that is
It's hard not to with this topic, is it?
Yeah, and is that if God radically accepts us for who we are, then we can't do a better job than God. We can't have higher standards than God does for us. And so if he radically accepts us, that means God doesn't make any junk, and that we would accept that. That doesn't mean that you stay where you are. It doesn't mean that you act like a dick or anything or live like that. You are absolutely being transformed. And that's another aspect of love. And love, a showing of authentic love, is showing an authentic transformation that goes in a process that goes through a lifetime.
You know, we had a guest on the show, John, not too long ago, if you remember, Ben Higgins, The Bachelor, was on. And I was so impressed with that young man and the way that he was sharing, going through his process, really, of identifying. He didn't know it, but it was true. And I think it's way more common, you listening here, that you feel this way and probably don't realize it or have felt this way at some point, where he discovered that he felt he was unlovable. And that's all about, I think, the knowing of oneself and what you fail on, what you struggle with, the mean thoughts that you have. Other people can't see them. You know, there are people that believe that they're a bad person and they're not really good, and they
buy the lie of being other. They're othered. They have uttered othered themselves so that they are isolated from others.
Yeah, because it's because I'm not
I'm not-
quality enough to reach out. I'm not enough. I'm not lovable. Any of these types of themes and thoughts, and I think they're way more common than what we would think.
I'm wondering if one of our aspects of loving is that we are to be, and this sounds trite.
Trite, yeah.
Trite is we do circle widening. We love the unlovely. We start with ourselves. We're the unlovely, and we give ourselves validation, and we have, and that we are of infinite value. And by doing that, we can go out and give other people infinite value of themselves.
Listen, when I'm doing marital counseling, and John, I'm sure you're in a very similar same boat, there's a lot of individual work going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sure, it's dynamic when we're creating something together, but each person in the room, when I'm working with a couple, is really needing to resolve and look at, like, what am I bringing to the table? And if you don't do that, your couples counseling sessions are not going to be very effective. Right. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
You know,
and you have somebody that is ensconced in saying, "I don't need to change," and I think I mentioned a few weeks ago that and you mentioned this and you challenged me on this, was that that you're seeing more and more women that think that they don't have to change in terms of of who they are, and in terms of marriage counseling or relationship counseling, and because traditionally when I did premarital, it was always
dude.
It was the dude.
Yeah.
But you've seen a little bit of a transition and change on that.
Women are resistant.
Are resisting, yeah. And I think, again, it's risking because you have to change. You have to risk change. And I think one of the things you have to do in terms of marriage is never, if you're having conflict in your marriage, is not to give up. There's a point where let's say if you're abused physically and verbally and all that and sexually abused, yeah.
There are reasons to end that relationship.
Right. But
Domestic
just to
violence,
say,
extreme crime, maybe addiction, that's a question mark, but yeah, there's a few, right?
Yeah. But I don't feel in love anymore. I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
I had a client like that. He gave it all up because he just didn't feel it.
Right.
And he could not see. I couldn't make him see. I could give him
be a guide,
and things. But he chose not to do that because he just decided, I'm not going to love her anymore.
Right.
And he wasn't in an affair or anything of that sort. And it's just, and I felt so bad for him. I felt like he's so self-isolated.
It's a pain point, John. That's what I was getting at a little bit ago. The pain that I think people are in when you get into that state, it's kind of like, I would just imagine it as torturous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, I'm working with somebody now with the issue we've identified with enmeshment. And because of enmeshment when they were very young, they struggled because their caretaker was way too close, creepy close, like long hugs, cuddling, kind of weird stuff a little bit. Well, he feels horrible about the fact that he is uncomfortable now as an adult doing hugging, cuddling, touching. You know, intimacy with his wife is struggle spot because it's just pain. You know, it feels bad. It feels off. You can get rewired. Or,
was he mishandled by manhandled? A great word, isn't it? By same sex, or was it opposite sex?
Opposite sex,
right?
The opposite sex, and it wasn't exactly sexual abuse, but again, it was a lot of creepy, feelings and whatnot. And what I'm getting at though is whether you feel like you've fallen out of love, and you should be nice to your spouse, you feel bad about yourself, or I'm not comfortable with hugging, and I should be, and so the critical self kind of just rains down. There's a real destructive, painful place that people get into.
Me Too movement. Go into this.
Yeah.
Okay. Women we're sexually, and you're hearing some from men too, and it could be in the same sex and
Sort of. We need more, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
happening.
Okay, but here's the question that I'm hearing is I think people may be so careful now that they are not hugging and holding because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble, or that view as a being as a
With
predator.
other people,
With other people,
meaning
yeah.
there's a fear of being safe from being
Yeah.
accused.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Do you think I haven't thought about that being a huge factor in all of this. I'm sure I'm wrong. Say a little bit more where you're seeing
Well,
that.
I think you've seen that in academia a bit.
It might be why I don't see it.
Yeah. Or you might see it certainly
I love academia.
where there's possibility of power differentials. Anywhere there's a power differential. And so you get somebody that is
Employer,
employer,
thing.
employee, yeah, or a
Nepotism.
coworker, yeah.
Okay.
So, but I think people may be careful not to hug or to touch because they are afraid they're going to get accused.
Okay. Yeah, not expressing affection or appreciation or a love for somebody because we have such twisted views about the danger and inappropriateness that we get into. I guess I could
It's
see
almost
that.
a puritanical or Victorian.
Do you think that's new?
I think it's
Yeah.
I do. I
There's
think
increased risk in that way
I
now?
think that actually people, as bad as the bad old days were in the 50s, and men were doing things that they shouldn't have done, that there actually was more an ability to be able to actually hold and touch people. I think the 60s kind of freed people up a little bit more. And now we've gone full circle, and we've gone to where we're coming back.
Well, I guess I can see that a little bit more, John, because I guess I saw it in a different form. You're making me think about people that have just not wanted to take the risks, and they remain disenchanted from the risks that falling in love or making companions and whatnot would have. I think there's great ambivalence now. Millennials don't get married for a reason. Yeah, you could think it just to be financial, but I think there's I really want to make sure this is the right thing. I really, really want to drag my feet. I'm procrastinating. I'm not sure. I'm not comfortable. Let me really just drag this along. I think there's a lot of fear in that more.
I
so.
feel bad for millennials. I feel, and that sounds like I'm being judgy.
Okay. What do you mean?
Okay, I feel bad because they don't have. A lot of times they're as puritanical in their relationships, even if they're having, let's say, anything kind of goes kind of sex, is they're also saying this is what is a good relationship, and this is in order for me to satisfy myself, and it's not being able to derive some sort of intimacy with someone else, because that's truly the way I think people are able to. I don't know how to explain it.
No, I
except
think
that-
I'm there with you.
I mean, there's a new puritanicalism there. I think the Zers are a little freer. The Generation
Z. All right,
yeah,
I was
or
wondering what you meant by
Generation
Zers. Yeah, so they're so you think that millennials have gotten a little bit more proper with it and sort of
I think
staunchy?
they have more boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Distance.
And so they again, it's the guy that's the overweight guy, that stereotype that is in his downstairs, or it's a female who.
It's a lot
says-
more females
says,
nowadays that
yeah,
are withdrawn, shut down.
who
yeah.
doesn't have a relationship and says, okay, I'm asexual.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Or a guy says, I'm asexual.
I see that a lot more now than I used to. Yeah,
I
see
think
that.
that's a false. I think it is.
Doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense to me because I think we're all sexual.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
100%. Yeah, now that being
And I'm
said,
too sexy for my shirt. I'm too sexy.
That's a song? Is that a
Yeah.
song?
Yeah, right, said Fred. You know that.
But I do. But I will say though, there are some biological pieces there that we may not understand. It
Well,
might be a
environmental.
fringe. It
Yeah.
might be rare, but when your dopamine, oxytocin, the bonding hormone, even vasopressin is another hormone that, what is vasopressin? I don't know that one as well. It's linked to
Vagus
long-term
nerves.
commitment and
Yeah.
pair bonding. So, there are these things that sort of help us biologically engage in the process of really connecting and bonding and
Yeah.
loving.
But I think if you, okay.
But that's more rare.
Here is someone who is not a physiologist or anything of that sort. I'm thinking if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good.
Yeah.
I've thought that too as well. Sex drive is one of those types of things. I've talked with many men that have just no sex drive. It could be testosterone or estrogen problems, but there's also emotional reasons that block you from being interested. There's a lot going in between our ears that, John, we know with trauma that for instance, that just blocks people, and then they're in that terrible pain spot alone and isolated and very self-critical.
Yeah. If you don't get into the arena,
Yep.
if you don't get into the arena, you're never going to be able to know whether you're someone that is able to love or everybody's capable of loving, I think, but
But they don't believe that, John. I've heard people say that too. I don't know that I'm able to. Or, wow, it's a surprise that I was able to have feelings for somebody. Like, that happens.
yeah,
That happens for people.
it's nothing better than feeling in love.
I
isn't it?
know,
So,
man. I know, right? It is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
The old people told me when I was a kiddo, John, they said, 'tis better to have loved and lost than to not have loved at all.
Yeah.
You heard
That's
this
a little
before, right?
Shakespeare.
Is that Shakespeare?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about how to cultivate this. What do we want to do to really get into cultivating these types of relationships where we can have loving relationships? And the first thing, I want to highlight again is you have to focus on loving yourself first.
Right.
If you feel horrible inside,
You've lost that loving feeling.
Here's another song.
Just quick question for you, and that you need to get yourself with groups that kind of encourage loving relationships.
What do you
In other
mean?
words, if you don't have it in your family, and
Okay.
you have a family of origin that's really screwed up, that you're able to find yourself a relationship where there's not a power differential, where there's a sense that people are accepted as close to unconditionally as they possibly be. That could be a synagogue, that could be a church, it could be a mosque, it could be something.
I'll tell you where a lot of people find love, not partners, but love is in AA.
Yeah.
So you're right, John. I love that. That's so. So let me finish my thing of self-love, focusing on that first. I feel like if there's a lot of self-criticism, if you've had very critical primary caretakers, if you've had trauma where you've been shown horrible examples of love, like domestic violence or heavily arguing parents even, you can get a lot of this really embedded deep inside of you where you're not feeling, as we've talked a little bit about today, lovable and enough. And when that's really the case, we have to really, really, really start there. So honestly, one of the best things you can do for your marriage is get into individual counseling and reconcile with some of those things. Like, I want to be hot on that. And then we're going to...
In other words, instead of finding the right person, you become the right person.
Right.
And I know that's a bromide, but it's
a good statement.
Yeah.
It's a good statement, and that's what your charge is to do. That's what your responsibility in a partnership that you and I have, together. But I hadn't thought about your point to move on to, get yourself in with groups of people. Choose your friends wisely is another phrase, right?
Right.
I love that line. I say it often.
You're
Because you learn from other people love.
Yeah, you're not going to find that person necessarily on Grindr. You're gonna, or Tinder or whatever. You're going to find that person. You're going to find that person when
By being open?
Being open and being in a place where you can share your vulnerabilities. That you're not, and that if you make, let's say I want to have as many sexual conquests as possible, you're not going to be open to having a real relationship where you have true intimacy and you will have true feeling of sexual pleasure when that time comes.
You know what's funny? I'm a big thing on making friendships, and we've talked about that on a show. And it just occurred to me there's a similarity there with what you just said.
Right.
You create friendships or deepen friendships through your own use of vulnerability. You share, and it gives the other person permission for them to share. And then you connect, sometimes on your pain points, but very much on being vulnerable and genuine with each other. And that's the same thing in love, isn't it?
Right.
That's what you were talking about.
You've been transparent, vulnerable. You are willing to risk.
Definitely have to have a willingness to risk, right?
And risk being rejected.
Oh, man, it's so tough. So tough. But that's your challenge. And this is why I think a lot of people will just avoid it.
So there's also the aspect of somebody said, well, I've been rejected so many times, I'm never going to have love. But the problem with that is the person may not be practicing self-love and saying, okay, I'm going to venture out. I'm going to make myself vulnerable. But by golly, I am loved and I'm worthy of love.
I guess what I'm centering in on a little bit today in my thinking is, do you, and you listening here to this show are going to say, oh yeah, but really and truly, if you think about like the idea, do you feel worthy of being loved? Are you worthy of that? What an awesome thing to say. And it's scary to say it because it sounds a little narcissistic, sounds a little uppity, sounds a little weird, but truthfully, I think people knowing themselves fear that they aren't worthy of that. I know with religion, I get tearful at all Easter just because I feel like, like why would I be so acceptable to, a high and almighty creator, little old me? Like it's, like, ugh, it's a risky feeling. I know that I am, but it's hard to feel that way, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because there's so much negative interference in our life that comes at us all the time, and it weathers you out. It wears you down. And I think that we have to kind of defend ourselves in that way, which starts with, self-love and self-appreciation. It's hard.
It is.
There's another element before we run out of time, boundaries, right?
Boundaries.
What about boundaries with love? Why would that be a part of this, do you think? Forging relationships, engaging, new people and finding your love or engaging with your love.
When I work, I used to teach and I work with students.
Okay.
And they talk about, well, you have your counseling boundaries, and so they use this language and very careful in terms of counseling. And well, I have to have
precision,
boundaries, and my boundaries have to. And basically, they're talking about rigid boundaries.
Yeah, they're too rigid.
Yeah, they're not flexible.
Distant.
You're permeable a little bit. That's.
Remember, I told you about that guy earlier in my career that he refused to even shake anybody's hand.
Yeah.
Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Jeez, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that boundaries you do need boundaries. Even there's a point where my wife, and I see this, is that she needs to be left alone, and she's starting sometimes even within that confines of marriage. I'm not always in her headgear. I'm not always in her face. And she's not in my face all the time, though she likes to talk more than I do. And
I think with this thing, it comes, how do we have love without talking about emotionally focused therapy, John?
Okay.
I can't do it. I have to do it at the end here.
Yeah.
Because, this boundary setting, basically, you say yes when you mean yes and no when you mean no is the way I like to put the most simplest form of boundary setting. People struggle to understand how close or distant we want to be because the pursuers in the relationship with EFT, as we know the model, episode 11, 101, 201, and 301, if you want to get deep on that, are fearful of you being too far away from me. If I'm in the abandonment camp, engulfment camp, you're fearful of you being too close to me. And so you have this balance, right? I really feel like boundary management is one of the biggest pieces of a successful relationship.
But you have to keep it permeable. You have to be able to be flexible.
It's a balance.
It's a balance.
Hard.
There are times when you do have to step in. There's times when you have to step back more and be firm. But there's also those times where it's the give and take. And it's like a cell membrane. It's an exchange that goes part. You still have that barrier, but you have that exchange of fluids, so to speak. Right?
Yeah.
Emotional fluids.
Emotional fluidity and fluid. Yeah.
Fluidity, yeah.
There's one more thing that I want to get in is the awesome material. I do like quoting David Chapman. He did the love languages. Because now, if you think of the intention that we want to forge, because again, we're talking about how do you really cultivate these relationships, you have to be intentional and you have to know what gets your other person's interest. If your partner's just not interested in sports and you're going to try to love on them and you want to take them to a sporting event, John, that's not going to work real well, right?
Yeah, it's not going to work with me.
Right? Or if your partner is not real wordy and you want to just level out this wordy stuff, I'm definitely guilty of this. It's not the way that they receive. You have to figure out, I need to wash their car, and they interpret that as love. Right?
It's acts of service, right?
Acts of service, quality time together, verbal affirmations.
Yeah.
Gift giving is a weird one. I don't understand the gift giving one. I feel like I'm missing one. Which one am I missing? Gift giving, love. Anyway, he has 5, but there's different ways to love people. The main point I'm really trying to make with this idea here is figure out what really your partner likes, and
My wife
understand
likes
that it's
flowers.
different than yours.
Yeah.
And when you want to express, you do it their way. Hopefully they do it your way when they're expressing, but we miss that. We're so myopic and egocentric that if I like sports and I want to be loving to you, John, I'm going to buy sports tickets.
Yeah.
And you're going to be like bored.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, I've been known to take my laptop to a baseball game, pro game. So
Jeez,
Yeah.
that's bad, isn't it?
I listen.
You listen to the game?
So
That's really funny.
yeah, but I'm not a regular guy that way. I don't know why. I'm just
That's fine.
Yeah.
And we can accept that. We have to understand that. I guess if I need to love on John Neal, I need to go buy opera tickets or something.
Yes.
Sweet. No, I know. If I really want to be loving to John Neal, I think that we have to take him to the library and just spend hours upon hours with like an encyclopedia or something.
Excellent. But I have a crush.
I'm being so mean to you, John.
I have a crush. She plays bluegrass and she's got alopecia. Her name is Molly Tuttle. I love her.
Okay.
So
And she has alopecia.
She has alopecia. She's
That's a
golden
defining
Harvard.
characteristic.
Yeah.
All right, we need to taxi out of here a little bit, John. Thoughts that you have, lingering ideas. How did we do today?
Oh, I think we really got. I really grooved on this because we did get a little philosophical, and that's where my bent is. But I also know that it's the authenticity that's there, and that we need to make our love language more resilient and more robust. And basically, is that when you say love, there's a lot more to just that 4 letters. It's more in terms of a very complicated but elegant and usage, I guess, basically.
Okay. All right, it is that time of the show where we are wrapping up, leaving you out, and we're going to end with what we call the shrink wrap-up. That is where everyone on the panel kind of does a summary of the show. Neil gets to judge to see who, quote-unquote, wins with the best description or summary of what we've got. So you just kind of did one, John. I'm going to let you think and recover.
Okay, we'll
your thoughts.
recover it.
I'll go first. Is that okay?
Good.
Okay. So look, this is a topic that really has so much on the positive and the negative side of what people are feeling. You might be listening to this show and have been betrayed, or you're currently single and divorced. There's a lot of rejection and pain that can be involved. That's why there's the risk. And so I want us to understand that love is possible for you in your life. And it's wonderful when you get it. A loving mom, a loving friend, a loving partner, a loving community. But the best one that we're really thinking sets up all the rest is a love for yourself. And that's where we want to start. And then you begin to experiment and find your way into a healthy characteristics with a relationship with somebody else. And when you begin to get it, it's like you can't describe it, but you know it. You feel it. And it's a lovely, lovely experience. So I want to really encourage people to experiment with this in their lives with their current spouse, or if you're single, with people that you're dating, or if you're in a hopeless state, even just in your mind and with yourself. That's what I'm kind of after. That was a lot, wasn't it?
It was great. I think love takes courage. Love takes a sense of being aware of making yourself ultimately vulnerable, and yet it is through your vulnerability that you become the most authentic and that you become the most capable of loving others, because by being vulnerable, you open yourself up to being loved and loving yourself and thus loving others.
Okay, good stuff. Neil, how you feeling over there?
I'm gonna go with John because I like the statement when he says when you become vulnerable. I think it goes back to the question of is love a feeling or a commitment? You have to commit to that becoming vulnerable.
Now you said it, and I think
Love
you
that.
should get it.
You know, he might get a win today, actually.
I think he should
a
get
win?
it.
Yeah, that I feel like I was running on a little bit, John. I appreciated you with that, but Neil, you're right. You're right on point, and you know what you added there. So,
I had this imagery.
Yeah?
When you were talking
Okay.
about the fact that it's something that is dynamic, it is, but it is. It's like light particles. Are they particles or are they packets or are they waves? And that's what love is. It's all that.
wow.
Yeah, there's an aspect of it that's very active. There's another aspect of it that is very self-affirming, sustaining. Yeah, and so it's dynamic. It's always dynamic.
John, that is a great way to take us out. I really
But you
appreciate that.
won. So.
Guys, stay well. We'll see you next week.